Yeah, to tell you today a little bit about the huge sense of disappointment I have as somebody who's been in the industry for more years than I care to remember. The internet to me just hasn't delivered its promise. You know, back when I was a lad with a BBC Model B Micro, it had so much promise of making the world a digital first place and connecting all of our services and eliminating paper and so on. And it just hasn't quite happened, because our digital lives today are actually, it's a bit crap. It's all forgotten passwords, scanning utility bills to send to the bank, and just there's so much paper still in what should supposedly be digital processes. And for me, that's one of the things that hasn't been mentioned today about the blockchain, because it's a new tool for developers to use to apply to existing problems. And the fact that it can disrupt organizations and their business models in finance and elsewhere is pretty well documented. But what's a lot less said about is that it can also simplify things for consumers by helping to deliver some of those digital first paper-free services. And I'll talk a bit about that as we go on. So in Wallet.Services, our view is that within the next 5 years, blockchain technologies will be something that everybody who is an architect or a developer or part of the IT industry will be touching. There will be an invisible technology that just become part of that internet and the technologies that we use to deliver applications. And we foresee that within a kind of 5-year time frame, and we're betting our business plan on that. But it won't happen until the use of this technology can be simplified, as some of the speakers have talked about today, particularly for the developer audience, and until business can really understand what this stuff is for, what blockchain is good for, and we're still very early in the cycle of that. So you've heard a few people talk today about what their views of blockchains, you know, what are they, what are they for? I'll use what I hope is the simplest explanation, or certainly the briefest. They're basically just big Excel spreadsheets in the sky that are pretty good at security. Fairly flippant, but that's kind of the level of understanding that we've reduced to in our early discussions with particularly government customers who are looking to use these technologies. But what are their functions? Well, they're good at transacting things, transacting information and assets. We've talked about that throughout today. And their character of being able to reduce the role of middlemen in these transactions, again, is well documented. And the fact that they can create a tamper-proof record, all known to this audience. From a business point of view, the impact that all of that has is that we can strip cost out of stuff, we can reduce costs, and we can speed things up, speed up markets, and we can prevent frauds and thefts. What's also come out in the conversations today are a few different views about how blockchains can help us retain confidentiality and individual privacy and sovereignty over our own data. I think there were a few different views of that, and in some places conflicting. But wherever's the truth, they're certainly good at storing and transacting valuable information and sensitive data that you wouldn't want to get into the wrong hands. So all of that's quite different than the way things tend to work on this internet that I'm disappointed with today. Because generally we all use services where we surrender data to the likes of Facebook, or if you ride a bike, you have a device that surrenders all of your data to Strava, or to surrendering data to government departments, and who pull this data together and surround it in these walled, secured gardens. That can be good for the consumer in the situation where, when one organization has all your data, they're better able to deliver meaningful services to you. But that's the root of the problem around sharing of information across organizations. And that's why our digital lives tend to be a bit shit, because we do things individually, digitally with governments and banks, But processes for people actually span all of these organizations, and that's a potential for blockchain to allow this kind of collaboration and secure sharing of data across many different organizations. You think of the last time you applied for a mortgage and got involved with a bank, credit checks agencies and the other legal actors involved in that, or the massive costs and problems that governments have in just sharing information between health and social services. So these are some of the most interesting applications for of blockchain for wallet services. And the way the internet's emerged since I was fiddling with my BBC Model B is a bit different than the promise. It's not distributed, the data is highly centralized, and it's also not resilient and tends not to be secure. Who in this room has not been affected by data loss by a financial institution, government department, or some other commercial operator? So these are the issues. How can we be more distributed and resilient and deliver these seamless digital experiences? Well, that's maybe where blockchains do have an answer, because they instead distribute data which is secure by default. And that's quite a fundamental difference. They also allow owners of that data to selectively retain control over it and be sovereign over that data. And interestingly, in this world of increasing cyber risks, there's no single point of failure. There's no point for that denial of service attack, making us potentially more resilient against cyber attacks. And that's why we've seen in this year, there's been many practical applications of blockchain, with Sweden just putting their land register pilot on the blockchain. Companies like Fundabeam doing share registry on colored coins in the Bitcoin network. The Estonian and Finnish health records being protected by a blockchain-like construct, and all of the different examples of financial services, settlement and reconciliation type things that we've heard about today. But in Wallet.Services, we've been, as I say, building a blockchain platform. We're going to tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But first of all, I'll talk about a use case that we built for Scottish Government that's emerged from prototype at the beginning of the year and will be taking through to pilot later on this year. And this is where we will be entertained by some moving pictures before the end of the day. There we go.
Digital life is complex. Every task, from getting your driving license to applying for planning permission, takes time, is error-prone, and sometimes isn't secure. We have to share sensitive information whenever we interact with various government services, but our data is disconnected and locked away in each isolated database. But what does this mean? For the citizen, it's confusing to see where they are in any given process. It's insecure, and the same sensitive information needs to be repeatedly shared with different departments, despite all of them offering their individual services online. All in all, it's inefficient for the government and a time-consuming and frustrating process for us. But it doesn't have to be that way. Wallet.Services' solution is Sicker. Sicker is Old Scots for trusted and sure. It uses a private civic blockchain to let citizens, government, and business share secure to deliver streamlined public services. Sicker has been applied to license application and approval in government, anything from an airgun license to council tax exemption, as each party involved provides a piece of the application in order to build a complete picture. So what does Sicker mean in the real world? Citizens control their own information, and it remains consistent and updated. Licenses are provably valid and can be checked without exposing sensitive information. Government is provably compliant with regulations and its agencies are connected. Digital life just got simpler. Sign up at Wallet.Services to know more.
Please do sign up at Wallet.Services. That would be great. I noticed a few of you already have today. That's one particular use case that we've built on top of our platform. But what's holding back the adoption of blockchain? And this came out when we were discussing this in the panel. In my view, there's a few things that will slow down adoption of this technology. The first, of course, is skills, which was mentioned before. there are relatively few experienced blockchain engineers on the planet. There's a few people who are fiddling, but in terms of being able to deliver the kind of full stack skills, that's a big learning curve on any of the blockchain platforms that are available today. Second area is really in standards and interfaces. Until enterprises are sure that the standards are there that allow them to invest and be future-proof, then that can constrain the take-up of this technology. And of course, there's all of the old enterprise itties, the scalability, the performance, the security, that perhaps haven't demonstrably been there so far. So that's why I'm delighted today to announce that Wallet.Services are making available from this week our limited developer preview. It's a big deal for us. After 18 months of planning and 9 months of development, we are making available our an intuitive cross-blockchain API working across many of the blockchains that you've heard about today, but with an abstracted interface that makes blockchain development available to a much lower level of skills. A set of services beneath that which implements the enterprise class operations that many organizations will require to actually run their part in some of these blockchains. And then a set of business components prefabricated to accelerate individual blockchain use cases. And the Sika example, which the video told you about, is one of those application patterns that we will be making available in our platform. So our vision, we're a startup organization, but we're making this available for people to play with and break at this stage with our plans to deliver a commercial service by June this year. And that vision is to empower developers and organizations to build and operate their blockchain solutions and support some of the innovations that you've heard about today. So at this point, I'm going to ask my co-director, Stuart, to come to the stage. There he is. And tell you a little bit about what's in the platform we're making available today. I will retire from the stage and come back at the end if there's any questions.
Hiya. Good afternoon. Can I see a quick show of hands if there's any developers in the room? Good. Any information security engineers? InfoSec guys? 1, 2, 3. Good. Okay, I was going to start by saying I was really excited to tell you today that we're going to make a developer preview available, but Peter's already stolen my thunder. It's all right. It's all right. The important point is that right now we are opening this up. We want to try and get some developers to come in, use the API, feedback to us on some of the proof of concepts and prototypes that they've been working on, how we can best smooth the interface for the mere mortal developers, those that can't do cryptography and GPUs and things that we can do. The service itself is initially cloud-based. We're on Azure, we're written in C#, .NET Core, and support initially 2 or 3, and the first developer preview is going to be the testnet Bitcoin and the testnet Ethereum, and our own private blockchains. We have our own private proof of stake, any object blockchain. So in the past where we've been storing hashes of transactions elsewhere, we can actually upload documents, any set of data. We are looking towards producing a schema for JSON documents that can be put up and shared through different parties. I got to do the slide. Once you sign up, you'll get access to our developer API and the key to access that. We're also providing a set of pre-baked components, as Peter was talking about earlier. This is a lot of the components that came out the back of the use cases that we've been doing, but because we've always looked to white label applications, these can be reused for your own applications. In that, there are a number of other components. We have our own STS, resource STS. This is all based around the latest set of technologies and standards, OAuth2, OpenID Connect. So it should allow you to easily integrate to any systems that you've got. I'm trying to preempt some of the questions that might come up. The multi-chain client that we use for our private blockchains will be released on GitHub. Question about that earlier. And we need to start the conversation with the other blockchain companies about how inter-blockchain interoperations take place. It started, we had a few conversations at Construct and a few other places, but in the world that we see going forward, there will be lots of blockchains. There'll be blockchains for specific sets of data. We've been going through these discussions looking at what we call sacred data almost. And this will require a change in legislation where the ownership of your house is actually a bit of paper kept by the registry office. It might end up in a database, but in this world where we have global use and all sorts of horrible cybersecurity threats, then that initial piece of sacred data has to stay protected. And that is a good use for a blockchain registry. And that's actually where that came out of the work that we did with the Sicker project, looking at what is a license from application through that validation and verification through multiple different departments into eventually the granting of the license and then onto the enforcement, the testing and revocation of the license. And that was, the license itself was stored in a blockchain as a sacred piece of data. Anyway, I know it's late and we all want beer. What I'd really like to do is, for the developers in particular, if you guys would like to, please sign up. We need more developers. The more we get, the wider the use cases will be. We're not particularly financial services based. We have been involved in a number of fintech summits and other such scenarios, and this is kind of a fintech audience, but we have access to lots of different types of technologies and use cases, and we'd really love to hear from you. Okay, your time. Thank you very much.